On a frigid winter night in Alaska's untamed wilderness, where silence was broken only by the howling winds and the crunch of snow underfoot, an extraordinary encounter unfolded. Warren Pierce, a man who had spent decades living alone amidst the harsh beauty of nature, found himself face to face with two desperate wolves on his doorstep. Their glowing eyes pleaded not just for shelter, but for survival itself. What happened next wasn't merely an act of kindness, it became a testament to the unbreakable bonds between humans and the wild. Imagine this. You're miles away from civilization, surrounded by nothing but endless snowfields and towering pines. The temperature has plummeted below zero, and the wind cuts through your bones like a knife. Now picture two emaciated wolves, magnificent yet terrifying creatures, standing at your door, trembling with exhaustion, their eyes filled not with hostility, but with raw desperation. Would you open the door? Would you risk your life to save theirs? For Warren Pierce, there was no choice, and that decision would change everything. For him, for the wolves, and for anyone who hears this story. Warren Pierce wasn't unfamiliar with solitude. For over 20 years, he had lived deep within Alaska's remote countryside, surrounded by towering pines, endless snowfields, and the haunting calls of distant wildlife. His log cabin, weathered from countless winters, stood as both a fortress against the elements and a sanctuary for his quiet existence. Every day followed a predictable rhythm, chopping firewood, tending to his small greenhouse, an experiment born out of necessity, and reading books by the crackling hearth until sleep claimed him. Life here demanded resilience, patience, and respect for the land. But nothing in Warren's experience could have prepared him for what awaited him late one snowy evening. It began with a strange scratching at the door, a sound that pierced through the stillness like a knife. Accompanying it were soft whines, faint yet insistent, cutting through the icy air. At first, Warren thought it might be a stray dog, or perhaps even a curious fox drawn by the warmth seeping from his cabin. He grabbed a flashlight and peered cautiously out the frosted window. What he saw made his heart skip a beat. There, trembling on his porch, stood two emaciated wolves. Their once proud coats were matted and dusted with snow, their ribs visible beneath thin layers of fur. Instead of baring fangs or growling menacingly, they gazed at him with haunted desperation, their breaths forming clouds in the freezing air. One of them let out a weak howl, almost as if calling for help. Warren froze, torn between instinct and compassion. Wolves were wild creatures, unpredictable and dangerous. Yet these animals didn't appear threatening. They seemed utterly defeated, driven to seek refuge from the merciless cold. Against every logical impulse, Warren cracked open the door wider. The closer wolf took a shaky step forward, its glowing eyes filled not with hostility, but with a pleading intensity. In that moment, fear gave way to empathy. How could he turn away such suffering? Slowly, Warren gestured for them to come inside. Hesitant but exhausted, the wolves padded across the threshold, leaving faint imprints in the blowing snow. As warmth enveloped them, a shudder passed through their bodies, as though they were finally releasing the tension they'd carried for miles. Thus began an extraordinary chapter in Warren's life, a solitary man sharing his home with two wild wolves, forging a bond neither species could have anticipated. To truly understand Warren's actions, we must delve into his past. Born and raised in Anchorage, Warren had always been drawn to the wilderness. As a child, he'd spend hours exploring forests, fascinated by the interplay of predator and prey, the delicate balance of ecosystems. But tragedy struck when he lost his wife and daughter in a car accident 10 years ago. Overwhelmed by grief, Warren retreated to this isolated cabin, seeking solace in the raw simplicity of nature. For years, he avoided human contact, finding comfort only in the company of books and the rhythmic cadence of chopping wood. This isolation hardened him, teaching him self-reliance, but it also left a void in his heart. Though he would never admit it, Warren longed for connection, for something or someone to remind him of the humanity he'd buried beneath layers of sorrow. The arrival of the wolves stirred emotions he hadn't felt in years. Watching them huddled together near the fireplace, their fragile trust evident in every movement, Warren realized that maybe he needed them as much as they needed him. As the first night stretched into morning, Warren observed the wolves closely. The smaller one limped slightly, favoring its hind leg. Its sibling, larger and more robust despite its gaunt frame, kept watch over it protectively. Warren couldn't shake the feeling that these two weren't just random strays. They were family. He rummaged through his pantry, pulling out raw meat intended for his own meals. Tossing a plate onto the floor, he stepped back, watching anxiously. The wolves devoured the food within seconds, their eyes reflecting gratitude. Warren felt a pang of sympathy. How long had it been since they'd last eaten? After feeding them, Warren tended the fire, flipping pages of an old novel he'd read countless times. Occasionally he glanced at the wolves, who dozed fitfully, occasionally lifting their heads at the sound of the wind outside. It struck him how surreal this situation was. Two wild predators resting peacefully in his living room. That night, as Warren lay in bed, he reflected on the day's events. These creatures, so often vilified as ruthless killers, displayed vulnerability and loyalty that mirrored human emotions. Perhaps, he thought, there was more to the natural world than mere survival. It was about connection, too. By the second day, Warren noticed the smaller wolf's limp worsening. Filled with concern, he decided to examine its injury. Moving slowly, he extended his hand toward the wolf, speaking softly. To his surprise, the animal allowed him to touch its swollen hind leg. Using supplies from his rudimentary first aid kit, Warren cleaned and bandaged the wound, marveling at the wolf's surprising cooperation. Meanwhile, the larger wolf watched intently, occasionally letting out a low rumble of concern. Warren sensed the depth of their bond. The bigger wolf acted not just as a protector, but as a caregiver, ensuring its siblings' safety. This realization hit close to home for Warren. He thought of his own family, of the love and protection he'd once provided. In caring for these wolves, he found a renewed sense of purpose, a chance to channel his grief into something meaningful. On the third morning, Warren spotted movement outside his window. A mysterious figure lurked near the edge of his property, partially concealed by trees. Grabbing his coat, Warren ventured outside, heart pounding. Who could possibly be out here in the dead of winter? The figure turned out to be Kara, a field researcher from a nearby wildlife rehabilitation center. She explained that these wolves belonged to a monitored pack and had gone missing during a blizzard. Her team had been searching desperately for them, knowing their chances of survival without help were slim. Kara's arrival brought clarity and a plan. Together, she and Warren prepared to transport the wolves to a safe enclosure where they could receive proper care. But before they left, Warren discovered tracks leading away from the creek. A third lone wolf, equally starved and injured, possibly part of the same family. Compelled by empathy, Warren ventured into the snowy wilderness to find it, risking his own safety to bring the lost wolf back to its siblings. When the third wolf was reunited with the others, the scene was nothing short of miraculous. The larger wolf sniffed the newcomer tenderly, while the injured sibling let out a low whimper, half rising on its bandaged legs. Within moments, the three wolves nestled together, reaffirming their bond. Kara revealed that the wolves were part of a pack that had been struggling due to dwindling resources and territorial conflicts. The smaller wolf, a young female, had likely been injured in a fight or caught in a trap. The larger wolf was her sibling, practically her only family. The pair had wandered off during a blizzard, leaving behind the rest of the pack. Warren learned that Kara's organization was working to preserve the remaining wolf populations in the region. They used GPS collars to track the animals, but the storm had disrupted their signals. The discovery of the third wolf added another layer of urgency to their mission. If all three could recover, they might rejoin the pack and strengthen its chances of survival. As Warren and Kara worked together, tensions arose. Kara, trained in wildlife biology, approached the situation methodically, focusing on data and protocols. Warren, however, felt a deeper emotional connection to the wolves. He struggled with the idea of handing them over to strangers, even if it was for their own good. One night, as they sat by the fire, Kara asked Warren why he had taken such a risk. "You barely knew them," she said, "and yet you opened your home, your life, to them." Warren hesitated, then replied, "Maybe I needed them as much as they needed me. Out here, it's easy to forget what it means to care for something, or someone. They reminded me of that." Days later, as Warren watched the truck carrying the wolves disappear into the twilight, He felt a mix of emotions, relief, pride, and a tinge of sadness. These majestic creatures had reminded him of something vital. Even in the harshest conditions, compassion could bridge the divide between species. Back in his cabin, surrounded by the familiar silence of the Alaskan wilderness, Warren smiled. He now saw the land not just as harsh and unforgiving, but as a place of harmony and connection. And deep down, he knew the wolves would carry a piece of his kindness with them wherever they roamed. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed a bond between human and wild creature that challenged your assumptions? Share your experiences. We'd love to hear them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories celebrating the unbreakable threads connecting us all.